Okay. I think since it's 9:04, I'll just start walking through a couple of pre-call announcements, and then Allie, I'll toss it to you. But for everybody in the call, you should have received an email with a Tableau workbook. We'll be using that during the session. If you have it, pull it up, and that's what you can use to either follow along with Allie on the call, or we will send out a recording of this as well. If you want to use the workbook afterwards, watch the recording and follow that, you definitely can. But if you haven't opened it already, open it now. And then I'll just walk through the first couple of slides. Happy Friday, and also April 1. March was crazy over here. I hope everybody else got through it just fine, but stay on high alert today, just in case you've got those people. To begin, you'll see on the call, you have, per usual, Catherine Rowe and I, we help run the user group. Allie Micka, our solutions engineer on the Tableau side, is joining today. She's going to walk through how to build a March Madness dashboard. And Allie, I'll give you a couple of minutes to do an introduction when I give you control over the screen. I did want to point out that if people haven't already, definitely take a look at Tableau Public after the session to see some of the dashboards that people have been building out. They're pretty fun. There are a couple of really good ones in there. And you can use and borrow data sets that you're seeing in there as well. A great way to continue to learn and practice some Tableau skills. And for anyone that's new to the call, I think we do have quite a number of people who have joined over the last couple of months, and thank you so much. We love running these, so welcome back. If you are new, the point of this call is to share best practices, tips, and learning from the industry. So anything that you have, like, feel free to ask questions, make comments in the chat box. I will be checking it throughout the session, and anything I can answer, I'll answer. Anything else, we'll make sure to run by Allie as we go or afterwards. Take a look at who all is on the call. We have some really amazing industry experts on here. Connect with each other. It's a great place to start a conversation. That's what we're trying to do. We just want to build up the community and create an innovative space for all of you to collaborate and do more with the data that you're already working with. Today, I'm just walking through welcome introductions now. Allie will walk through how to build the dashboard, and then we'll do some questions at the end. Threw in some past presenters in here, including Duncan, and a soon to be Allie will be on this wall of fame. I did want to say a quick, best of luck with the brackets. I think we're going to learn a lot today. Hopefully people out there have been doing fairly well. Feel free to put in the chat how your bracket's doing. Mine is not doing well, I will say that. And I should have turned to the data before I even got it going, which I will also learn today. In the future, we do have a tug officially planned for June with the Seattle Kraken. There will probably be an announcement about one just before that as well, so stay tuned. But other than that, let us know who you are and where you're from in the chat. Let us know how your brackets are doing. And then in the Q&A box, ask questions throughout the session. We'll make sure to get to you. And Allie, I will pass it off to you. Take it away.
Thanks, Mikkel. All right. I have a couple of slides to kick things off. Just to introduce myself, thank you again for joining today. I'm really excited to share some of my findings. Also encourage you to go through and kind of create your own as you go. Oops, sorry, I just want to make sure that window's not in the way. So a little bit about me as we go through, before we go through Tableau Desktop. Like Mikkel said, my name is Allie Micka, my tie to sports. My favorite team I saw in the chat, We have some Canadians people on here, but I am a diehard Caps fan. I was born and raised in Washington, D.C., which is where I currently live. I took a quick break from the DC area. I went to the University of Massachusetts. Oops, a little spoiler there. I went to the University of Massachusetts where I received a dual degree in sport management and finance before shifting over to the tech space. Joined Tableau about 2 years ago. So super grateful for the opportunity to combine my day-to-day job with being able to share my love for sports with all of you and other past projects I've worked on. And then last but not least, which I already kind of clicked through, I couldn't introduce myself without showing a picture of my dog named Ovi after Alexander Ovechkin. But today he traded in his skates and pucks for a basketball, right on theme with the March Madness dashboard that we're about to build out. So without further ado, let's jump into Tableau. So this is going to be, a beginner lesson for some people if you've never used Tableau, but also some new tips and tricks that you may not know about. So feel free to follow along with the step-by-step guide that I provided. But then also I encourage you to, find your own or make your own discoveries, build your own sheets and dashboards with the data set here, bring in other data as you see fit, and really just have fun with this. So to jump in, Tableau Desktop, you can connect to a number of different files. You can either connect directly to the Excel file that I had sent over or open up that incomplete workbook that I had sent. But as you can see here, there's a number of native connectors within Tableau. You can connect to different databases as well as files. I'm going to actually connect to one of the recent workbooks, which is that incomplete dashboard that I had sent over. We're not going to save that. We'll see what happens. So as I jump in and go to the data source pane, you'll see here that I have my Excel file that I've connected to. And then if I wanted to connect to any other additional data sources to bring those in, I certainly can. If I wanted to union, additional data to pull in, find different aspects of the sheets or the different dashboards that I built out, you can do that. You can also see the different fields that we're going to be working with today. Most of my sheets are built around looking at who our winners are over the past 20, 30 years. But if you wanted to dive into who might be losing or kind of that standoff between the winning and losing teams, you definitely can. So let's jump in and start building. As you'll notice below, in the incomplete workbook, I've already added a few sheets in here. Feel free to rename them. If you're not sure how to start a brand new sheet, all you have to do is click on the plus sign here below. But to start building, I'm going to go into our first sheet here. So the first thing I want to look at is where our winners are coming from. I followed college basketball for a long time. Obviously, UMass doesn't have the rich history that Duke, Kansas, Kentucky may have. But I wanted to look at and see if there was any trends based off of states or campuses that have won a number of games throughout the years. So to start things off, I'm going to drag my winning team state onto the view. And Tableau has powerful geospatial capabilities, so it recognizes the longitude and latitude of the states that I've pulled in, and I can see a dot representing each of my winning states. So this is just the winning team data that is shown on this particular map. This is really interesting. I can see all the states that have won at least a game in a number of the March Madness tournaments over the years. I can see the teams that have never, or the states that have never won, but it's not really telling me information about how many games they've won or how many tournaments they've won. You can see up here, states like Montana, Wyoming, North Dakota are represented, but so is North Carolina, and it kind of looks the same based off my experience watching college basketball. North Carolina has most likely won a few more games than states like Montana or Wyoming. So what I can do is drag our number of records, which is just showing us the number of wins that each state has. And I can drag that out to color and quickly see that my assumptions are correct. States like California, Kansas, Kentucky, and of course, North Carolina are well represented in terms of wins over time. From here, obviously, I can readjust some of the formatting, change the colors. I'm actually going to just switch this to a straight blue and then use a stepped color to really make my states that have a lot of wins pop. So as I hit apply, you can see even more distinctly that Kansas, California, North Carolina, and then some of these Midwest, Mid-Atlantic, I guess, for Pennsylvania schools have won a lot more games than, you know, the Montanas and Wyomings of the world. Not to say that they can't win in the future, but we can start to see trends of where those wins are coming from. So next, I want to break this down even further. So one of the newer features with Tableau is the introduction of map layers, which allows us to look not only just at the state layer, but then bring in more layers of data, knowing full well that North Carolina is one of the most winning, if not the most winning state in this map. But I know there's a few schools in North Carolina that have won a ton over the years. So I want to look more on the campus level. So what I'm going to do is drag the winning team city onto our maps layer here. If you're on an older version of Tableau and you don't see this, definitely recommend downloading our newest release, which actually 2022.1 came out this week. Some really cool new features, including, I mean, in the past release, this maps layers, which allows you to see both the state level data and the city level data on the same map. I'm missing a few locations here. If I click into that, I can go in, quickly edit to add more layers of detail onto my map. And what I'm seeing here is there's just a bunch of ambiguous cities, knowing Amherst is Massachusetts in this case, but I know there's also an Amherst, Virginia. There's an Amherst, I think there's an Amherst, New York. So I'm actually going to go ahead and tie this to our field, which is winning team state. And that fixes most of my cities here and maps them to the correct city. You'll notice there's still 2 unknown cities. You can certainly go in, put in custom locations. I'm just going to go ahead and filter that out because I have a lot of the data that I need in this map. And I can quickly see where those schools are. So once again, Chapel Hill and Durham, side by side, if you kind of hover over them, make up probably a lot of these North Carolina wins. But once again, I'm not seeing the kind of the comparison between UNC over here and then gonna just pick on Montana today, I guess. But up here, it looks like Montana and North Carolina are winning the same amount of games. So going to bring out that number of records or number of wins onto my view again, just to add that extra layer of detail. This time I'm going to put it on size. And you'll notice that the size of my dots increases so I can see which campuses have more wins than others, which of course we have the UNC and Duke making up the majority of the North Carolina wins, with Wake Forest trying to keep up over here. Last bit of detail I'm going to add to this particular sheet is adjusting some of the colors, doing some quick formatting things, all in the step-by-step guide, just to make it a little bit easier for my audience. I can adjust the color of my dots and then add a border just to make each of the cities really pop. You'll notice I can now see a little bit of a difference between Chapel Hill and Durham side by side. If I add that border, I can see that there's 2 data points there. So now that we've looked at where the winning teams are coming from, which is really interesting, I can see the insights right off the bat. The states, schools that I expected to have won a lot. But what a lot of us are really interested in, or if you don't even follow basketball that closely, is your bracket. So looking at seeding, we always know there's a Cinderella team that sometimes pops up on the scene, or watching the #1 seed lose and ruin your bracket, which I have felt that a few times for a few different brackets this year. So I wanted to dive in using this data to see if there's any trends with seeding, number of wins, if we can see if there was any common upsets in order, maybe next year we'll do a little bit better on our brackets. So like I said, best practices, make sure you name your sheets, but I've already gone ahead and done that, but feel free to adjust the name. All you have to do is double click that, and then it's my title here. where are the winning seeds or winning teams coming from? And then I'm going to go into my next sheet and start looking at some of the seeding. So from here, I want to look at how our different winning seeds do per round. So on a Mac, I'm going to press Command. On a PC, it would be Control. And I'm going to select our rounds and our winning seeds. I'm going to drag that out to columns. And then once again, I want to look at the number of wins per round per seed. So I'm going to drag that out to rows. I can quickly see, obviously, number one seeds do the best over time throughout the rounds. And Tableau recognizes that the data that I brought in should be displayed as a bar chart here. But based off of the order of my data, the rounds are kind of mismatched. And while I can easily see number one seeds are always the most popular seeding in each round, I can easily rearrange my data by just dragging and dropping. And I'm just going to choose the order that the rounds go. You can certainly do it, if you want to look at from national championship to round 64, you can play around with the order that you want your data by just simple dragging and dropping. If this was like an alphabetical or numerical, you can also just click on these three lines here and it'll quickly sort, but you can also manually drag and drop the order of the rounds that you would like. I'm going to go ahead and just to add a little bit more detail or information onto my chart, I'm just going to bring number of records onto the label so I can see, the 128 wins for number one. Just a side note, I do have some Hokies in the family, so you might be thinking UVA did get upset a couple years ago, which is not included in this data set here. This is only showing, I think, up until 2016, and they won 100% of the time up until that historic UVA loss in the first round, UMBC, I believe it was. But based off of this data here, 99.9% of times you're going to want to pick number one seeds in the first round to win outright for every single conference. And then as you move along, you can see that, for example, the 8 and 9 seed are 50-50 bets. I mean, you could probably pick 2 8 seeds and 2 9 seeds, and you have a 50-50 shot at those winning. And even still, the 10 through 12 seeds, it's not super uncommon, as we know, for those to be upset. And then very few 15 seeds make incredible runs, but it's definitely not impossible. But even more than just looking at the sheer number of wins for each seed as we move throughout the conference, I wanted to see the breakdown of upsets versus expected results. So I went ahead and created a calculated field, and I'll open that up just so you can see what I was looking at. And this field should already be in the incomplete workbook that you have open if you're following along. But I wanted to create a calculation that says if the winning seed is lower, like numerically lower than the losing seed, then that's the expected result. We expect the lower seeds to win. Everything else would be considered an upset. So I can now use this calculated field as in the columns or the rows, or I can add it to my marks card. So I'm going to go ahead and add it to color. And then as you can see in the first round, as expected, since I'm only looking at winning records, it would be a kind of a 50-50 break. Once you get to the 9 seed and lower, that would automatically be an upset based off of the calculation we've created. But what I found really interesting, and this is just kind of a side note going through building this workbook that I thought was really interesting, you'll notice that in the round of 64, there were 128 expected result number one seeds winning. And then that went down to 111 in the round of 32. This might be pretty obvious for people that are bracketologists or whatever they call people that, are experts in brackets, building brackets and following them. But I did break it down just to show what I was looking at if you're not as familiar. But if you look up here, this is a bracket from this year. The 1 seed always plays the 16 seed, 8 always plays 9. And then obviously, as you move throughout the bracket and upsets happen and different games are being played, the different numbers or different rankings playing each other can kind of switch around. And there's a bunch of different combinations. but in the second round, the number 1 seed will always play the 8 or 9 seed, assuming the number 1 seed wins. If you go back to the chart that we had just built, of the 17 losses in round 32, you can see those made up in that 8 or 9 seed down here. And I can quickly see that, 8 or 9, because they always play that number 1 seed, it's always going to be an upset. Whereas, some of these 5, 6 and below, they're going to always, or they could play a higher seed, they could play a lower seed. So I just found that really interesting. Maybe everyone already knew that, but just some insights that you can gain from building out, dragging and dropping, and playing around with different calculated fields, if then statements, things like that. And then finally, let me just move. Oops. The screen is blocking this. Hold on one second. Let me just subtract this really quickly. Sorry, I have the little Zoom thing that's blocking and I can't move it. But as you'll notice down here at the bottom, there we go. As you'll notice down here at the bottom, I did have to scroll over. So I want to go ahead and adjust the fit to fit the entire view. So that way I'm looking at all of my bar chart throughout the different rounds, all in one place. And then finally observing the national championship, which I had mentioned, looking pretty good for Kansas statistically this year, with the majority of our national champions being number 1 seeds. But that's not to say there isn't hope for a number 8 seed, like UNC, I think they have won before. So who's to say they can't do it again? But just some insight onto the different seeding and how they perform over time, or throughout the rounds, I guess. Lastly, I wanted to create some kind of visualization looking at wins over time, or the path, I guess, to get to the championship, how many wins you have to, how you have to win 6 times, but, some kind of timeline within my data source. I decided to have a little bit of fun with it. So I'll kind of walk you through it. It involves a little extra work because I wanted to do some fun custom shapes, but I thought it'd be really interesting to look at a timeline of our champions based off this data set throughout the years. So with that being said, I'm going to start off by bringing our round onto filters. So what I'm doing here is basically filtering out every piece of data that isn't a national champion. I only want to look at our champions. So now, because I filtered that out, every data point that I bring onto the view is going to just be that national champion data. From here, I want to look at how they've performed over the years, or who those champions were. So I'm going to drag year onto columns. I can see my timeline starting to be formed here. I'm going to once again adjust the fit so that I can see my entire timeline in one place. And then this is where the kind of fun part, this little Tableau trick, you can create custom shapes using Tableau. So I'm going to change my mark to a shape here. And it's going to automatically populate all these little circles for each of the years. But I want to look at our winning team, so our champions as shapes. So I'm going to drag that out onto shape. And Tableau will automatically populate, these X's and squares and circles and things like that. But you can also bring in custom shapes if you want. So when we sent over the resources, I included a zip file of all the different logos. If you have time and can follow along, I'll show you how to go about adding those custom shapes, or it's just something that you can play around with after the call. But I'm going to go back to my slides really quickly and show you where that would live. So in your My Documents folder on your computer, you're going to have a Tableau repository folder. And within that folder, you'll have a Shapes folder. If you take the logo folder and put it into your Shapes folder, Tableau will be able to read that as a shape to be used in a dashboard. And then you can use those logos or any custom shapes that you may have for any of the visualizations you're building out. And then you can bring those into the dashboards. So if you want to move that folder into your repository, you certainly can do so now, but I will kind of walk you through what that will look like on the Tableau sheet. So if you go into shape and you have just moved that folder into your repository, you're going to have to click reload shapes. And then as you look at this drop-down menu, you can use the pre-built shapes. I have a few custom shapes that are already on here, as well as my March Madness folder with the logos here. So most of these are roughly in alphabetical order. So I'm going to go ahead and assign palette, but you can also do this manually, which we're going to have to do to fix a couple of these logos like Michigan, Michigan State. Nevada should be the UNLV logo. They said North Carolina instead of UNC in this data set. So just a couple of little fixes here, assigning those shapes. And then I hit OK. And you'll notice that our timeline, instead of X's and O's, has our custom logos for each of our winners over time. I adjusted the axis just to give myself a little more real estate, and then I'm going to make this shapes a little bigger. I'm going to make them as big as I can without them overlapping. And now I can see, you know, over time, going back to our first map, we see the Dukes, the UNCs, Kentucky has a handful, but I can see who our winners are over time. It looks like we've got a Villanova sandwich based off of this particular data set. So just another interesting way to look at data. I do encourage you once again, play around with some of the date fields, look at the winners or losers over time. You can look at things such as like the scores for each round was another thing I was playing around with, but there's so much more that you can build with this data set. So I definitely encourage that. But for now, we looked at where the winning teams have come from, what seeds are most likely to win for each round. And then once again, just a fun little timeline of who won it all. So now that we've built out a few of these sheets, I'm going to pull them all together onto a dashboard so that they're able to interact with one another. These insights that we found in kind of different areas of our data set, we can pull them all together into one visualization, have the different data and different sheets interact with one another. And then we can, you know, gather a ton of information so that our brackets are all perfect next year. So to start building out my dashboard, I'm going to drag out the sheets that I've built onto my view. And when you're designing a dashboard, you want to think of how your user is going to read it. So best practices, people read from left to right, top to bottom. So you want to make sure that you grab them at the top with some of your bigger insights, and then they're going to be moving down the sheet as they go. So as much as I love my little timeline that I built here, you know, the map and the seating is really where the power, the most insights are going to be gathered from. I can also go in and adjust some of the formatting here. Let's see if I can make my screen a little bit bigger. And then I don't need all of these all these keys in my view. The winning team, if you hover over, and once again, you could play around a lot more with the information you're putting in the tooltip. But as I hover over, I can see that the winning team was Kentucky. So I'm actually going to take this off to buy myself a little bit more room. And then in terms of also adding a little bit more room, I have all of this white space over here in my dashboard. So I'm going to go up here, and Tableau, you can build your dashboard to be compatible with your phone, tablets, desktops. Right now it's set to a fixed size, which is a generic desktop. I'm going to go ahead and readjust this to automatic. So right now I have my dashboard, my Tableau desktop on my biggest screen, but now that it is automatic, when I bring it over to my laptop, it'll compress the dashboard automatically so that it's going to always show the way that I've designed it without having to readjust or scroll or anything like that. The last little piece before we start really formatting the title, giving people directions on how to interact with the dashboard, I'm going to go ahead and just remove some of these headers, which you can also do when you're customizing the sheet. And then I realized if you're following along, I forgot to put filters on my actual sheets. So I'm going to just go ahead and pull those into the dashboard itself. So if I click on the drop-down arrow on my sheet and hover up to our filters, I can apply a filter directly on the dashboard. So whether that be dragging and dropping onto your filters card, like we did for the national championship for who won it all, or we're looking at, winning team or the year, I can do that directly on the dashboard as well. And then just in terms of best practices and creating more room on my dashboard, I'm going to change this to a drop down. And then I also want to make sure that this is applied to all of my worksheets. So for the timeline, we were looking at national championship or national champion, but we wanted that to be just for that particular view. But for winning team, if I want to go in and look at, UMass's wins over time, I want to be able to have that apply to every single sheet that I've built out here. So I'm going to go in, apply it to all the worksheets using this data source, or if you're pulling in multiple data sources, you can apply using all related data sources, but I only have one data source here. So either one would work in this case. And then I also want to bring in our timeline data. So looking year over year, I'm going to bring in that year of year filter. And once again, same thing as before, you can either make it into a single value. The slider was interesting if you wanted to look at it kind of like a time lapse, which once again, I have to apply it to all worksheets in order to see that. But right now I'm looking at all the years, but I can also kind of slide through and see it in like a timeline or a time lapse view. We also have a feature called Pages that would automate this, but thought that was an interesting way to kind of look and see how the schools have trended over time, or looking at the map, how the states have trended over time was another interesting perspective in terms of filtering out our data. And then finally, I don't like how it says year of year, so I'm going to quickly edit that title. Just some formatting best practices. Oh my goodness, I can't spell today. And now we're just looking at the year, and you can certainly customize this as like championship year or like tournament year, however you want to, label that particular filter. So last but not least, we are going to add a title, an image, and some directions for our users before we finalize this and send it out for everyone to play around and see what we found out. So also in the resources that we sent over, I included a Ncaa logo. And then in order to add a custom image to your dashboard, you can drag out this image object. You'll see the gray pane, I guess, where you want to put it. I'm going to put it in the top left-hand corner. Select my image and make sure that I fit and center it within this object. And then I can play around with the sizing because it doesn't need to be all that big. And then I also want to add directions into the view. So what directions do in terms of best practices is, I know how I built this dashboard. I wanted to inform you guys how I was thinking about this as I was going through and building this out. Everyone has different ideas of how they want to interpret the data or understand the data, or even just build their own dashboards. But if you want people to be interacting with your own dashboard, they might not understand exactly what they're looking at. So it's definitely important to include directions. Just even if they've never used Tableau, hey, click on a city, and then it'll filter down the rest of the dashboard so that you can see what campus does the best in tournaments, or how they finished over time, things like that. So to do that, I'm going to drag a text box right below the Ncaa logo, and then I'm just going to copy and paste. And you can obviously make your directions your own, depending on if you built out any kind of custom views here, or want to provide additional instruction. And then once again, I can format that accordingly, change the size, change the font, color, to match everything else. So I've provided directions to use the filters to look at specific schools and years of competition, to observe which cities and states are best represented, likelihood of seeds to be upset, and the champions over the years. Make that a little smaller. I can add it. I can move my filters beneath the directions so that they're easily accessible. Hey, here are the directions, and also here are the filters right there next to them. Drag and drop those right below. Adjust some of the sizing here. Make that a little smaller. And then last but not least, I need to add a title so that everyone knows what they're looking at. I mean, for NCAA, that could really mean anything. It could be football, soccer, basketball in this case. So I've already included a title here. You are welcome to use that. All I would have to do is click Show Dashboard Title, or I can add a text box in similar to what I did with the directions. If you don't want to use your dashboard title or want to add a different title, whatever works for you. I'm just going to go ahead and use the dashboard title that I've already created. It happens to be formatted for me. And then I'm going to drag and drop it next to the NCAA logo. So that way I still have the height in some of my other views. And then we are just about done in terms of formatting. So you can add filters throughout the dashboard. I can filter over time, like I said here. Or I can add a filter on each of my sheets so that when I click around, and I'm actually a little trick that I think I put in the step-by-step guide, is I'm gonna have this timeline ignore any actions on the dashboard just because we want it to stay a timeline of champions. So when I click on city, it's not gonna pull up, Montana and have it be completely blank or something like that. But as I click through the map, now my bar chart is updating. If I click through the filters here, that would also filter out the rest of the dashboard so that I'm able to see a number of different things all in one place. I can see the map where my most winning schools are, what those most winning or most likely to win each round, and then also looking at the upsets, and then our little timeline of champion here. So with that being said, I am ready for this to be shared up. I can either share it to my Tableau Online or Tableau server site, or which I encourage all of you to do once you make this your own, or even just take what you've learned today, publish it to Tableau Public. As Ncaa mentioned, there are tons of dashboards up there, most of which can be downloaded so you can see under the hood how they're built, and then start to make them your own, customize them, share them with the world, because the amount of March Madness dashboards that we have on Tableau Public is truly incredible. There's some that are around bracketology. There are some that are just, looking at wins versus losses, some that are just focused on national champions, things like that. But there's some really, really interesting dashboards up there that I definitely encourage you to look at. With that being said, I know I talked really fast, but if there's any questions in the chat, definitely let me know. Anything I missed, anything you need clarified, I'm happy to answer. But I appreciate you all being here today. I hope you learned a lot about Tableau. I hope we all have better brackets, at least than I did this year, based off of some of our findings. But I really appreciate all of your time.
That's awesome. Thank you, Allie. This is great. I do have a question for you that came from Gabby. We were curious about Tableau Online and custom shapes. I didn't know how to answer this. Wondering if you're able to. She uses Tableau Online and was wondering, do you need Tableau Desktop in order to do custom shapes?
That might be something I'd have to follow up on. I do know with Tableau Online, if you're referring to web editing, there are certain features that are available in Tableau Desktop that are not quite available yet on Tableau Online. The disparity between the two is becoming a lot smaller in the newest releases, but if you don't see custom shapes on the Tableau Online site, that might be why. I will double check and follow up on that, but I do know there's certain formatting things that aren't quite available yet on Web Edit.
Cool. That's my understanding as well. Thank you. Yeah. And if anyone has any questions at all, if you're working on something in your dashboard and you want to throw it out to Allie, now is definitely the time. We'll get it answered, or at least see about finding the resources to send over. So Gabby, once we find a firm answer on that, we'll make sure to let you know.
Yeah. And curious too, if anyone wants to put things in the chat around any customizations you did. You could even add custom colors too. I did custom shapes today, but you can create custom color palettes. So I just used the blues that were in Tableau already, but I did toy around with the idea of creating a custom Ncaa color palette. So definitely encourage you checking that out. If you didn't follow along with the custom shapes too, there is a resource that I included in the step-by-step guide on how to do it. But it's pretty straightforward, adding that folder to your repository, and you can add a number of different shapes there.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, and we'll give, if anyone else has any questions, we'll give you a few minutes to ask, and happy to discuss any thoughts as well. Hopefully no one's too torn up about brackets or what they think is going to happen tomorrow. And thank you, Chris, for some of your commentary as well. I appreciate you answering some questions in there and putting in tips. Yeah, for those still on the call, Catherine Rowe just put in there, if you post some of these vizzes to Tableau Public, please do, and put a hashtag on them, SETUG, and we'll take a look at them and see how everyone's is. I hope people do that. I think that'd be very fun. Go Habs. Hey, Allie.
Sorry, I was trying to, I think my internet crashed.
That's okay. That's so classic, actually, of course.
Thought it waited till the end though. Good timing.
Actually. Yeah, Catherine's saying that everybody should be putting these vizzes onto Tableau Public with the hashtag SETUG, and we can take a look at them.
Yes, I would love to see what everyone has created. No, it's really interesting looking through the Tableau Public. Mikkel and I were working to prep for this, and it's like, oh, I love this idea, I love that idea, and trying to like pull it all together, but then also get creative with it. So I'm really excited to see what everyone comes up with.
And as a reminder for people on the call, and we'll make sure to send this out as well, we'll have a recording and I'll make sure everyone has it. And then our next scheduled tug is in June with the Kraken. They'll walk through how they're working with Tableau today. And I'll let everyone know if there's anything happening before then as well. Chris is pointing out the Stanley Cup playoffs that are coming up.
Not looking too great for the Caps, unfortunately. But from the Canes, I'm hoping to be at the Stadium Series game next year. So hopefully the Caps have a better year next year.
No, that'll be great fun for this group. We've got a few hockey teams in here.
The hockey vizzes online are really, really cool too. I know they've been doing a lot with basketball, but I've seen some hockey ones too with the heat maps of where they're shooting from, things like that. So
You're right. No, hockey's taking Tableau by storm. If people do want to check those out, they're pretty fun.
Yeah, and I saw at the very top that there was some Canadians people on the call. I worked with some people from your BI team last year. So glad y'all are on this call if you're still on. See a UMass alum, shout out. Go you.
Okay. Do you see Tyler's question?
Yes. I know you can replace shapes with logos and charts as shapes, but are there ways to replace a data point with a logo? Let me think. There is a way to do that. I'm just trying to think of the best way to describe that. Data point. Same way you do with shapes. Awesome. Yeah. I know you can like customize the different labels, the way that you're presenting the labels. You can add custom images and shapes and things like that. And then just in terms of bringing in data points, it's not limited. I just did the national champions for the sake of time, but you can definitely include a lot more shapes, just a little bit longer process for trying to squeeze everything in this time frame. Oh, I would definitely love to stop by Fenway Park.
Definitely should.
Hopefully I'll get up there in the summer, not the winter. Don't miss the winters. Yeah, free online sites that allow you to remove background from logos, add the logo to a data point. Yeah. Another little tip, and I ran into a couple of errors, so I made sure there's a few logos that weren't coming through, but I couldn't figure out which ones they were. I didn't want to mess anything up. But also, for this particular use case, I was Googling like Michigan logo transparent, and it was giving me like a transparent background, but then also Google has a lot of different images that have like white backgrounds. I like the transparent ones, especially on scatter plots. If the logos overlap one another, it looks a little bit better.
Okay. Let's see. This was just shared with us. I'll post it in for everyone. Let's see. Let's see. Erland Rivero just sent that over for removing backgrounds from images and sent that over. So I just wanted everybody to see it. Yeah, it's pretty sweet. I haven't seen that before, actually.
Me neither.
Thank you, Erland. Okay. Okay, Fiona sent over a tip as well as some question. She said, when I publish a dashboard with colors that are in her Tableau desktop repository, the colors work. When she publishes online and sets it to send to people's emails, the colors do not render and end up rainbow. Any suggestions? Have you seen that before?
Huh, that's interesting. Here, I did just quickly find a community article. Let's see if that do that. Let me double check on that one and see if I can find a workaround. Depending on, it looks like sometimes it depends on the version. Not sure why they're resetting. So I will double check on that. See if there's a workaround.
Yeah, we'll make a note of that, Fiona, and get back to you. Thank you for asking. But these are great questions because it's good to see what people are running into and sharing some resources with each other.
Having multiple rows per abbreviation. Yeah, I'm wondering if you could do like instead of having it pop up every single time the row exists, do like a count distinct or something like that, but I don't know if that would work.
100%. Yeah, definitely connect with each other. I think that's the best part. Reach out to each other with questions for sure. If anyone has any last second questions, send them in. You know where to find us. I'll make sure to get everybody our contact info in case you have further questions or want to connect. One thing I failed to put in the chat before is our LinkedIn group. If you're not a part of it already, definitely join. We'll make sure to get some communication out there about future user groups, connect with each other there, ask questions. Again, the whole point is to just help innovate, ideate, share best practices. We really appreciate everybody coming on. Sessions like this are super fun. Thank you very much, Allie. That was great to have you walk through, and thanks to everybody in the call. So if that's all we got, we'll give you 4 minutes back and we will reconvene soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.